Okay, so let's proceed on to functionalism. Symbolic interaction focuses on learning, socialization, and labeling. We're going to go all the way back to Emile Durkheim, but this will make sense. Emile Durkheim was a functionalist. Remember, he talked about suicide and links to society and social solidarity. And when he looked at deviance and crime, from his functional perspective, he looked at how they contribute to the perpetuation of society. So you're probably wondering, how the heck can deviance or crime help keep society going, contribute to that? It doesn't make sense. Well, what Durkheim did was he focused on how breaking a rule or a norm reinforces to other people in society what that rule or norm is. So, breaking it, deviating from it, and then being punished for their actions, for one person, according to Durkheim, encourages the rest of us, the rest of society, to come together in solidarity against the deviation. Kind of like it gives us a common purpose. And you could look at any tragedy, I think, and see this occur, but I think those involving gun violence in schools, mass shootings in schools in the US in particular, provides the clearest example that everybody's likely familiar with. For example, after the shooting on February 14th, 2018 in Parkland, Florida, at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School, when 17 people were killed and 17 more were seriously wounded, there was an enormous social and political response from young people, from the students themselves. Led by students who had attended this school, young people across the United States began to rally and organize themselves, protesting for stricter gun laws. And they managed to bring an enormous amount of attention to the issue and to keep it in the news, a lot more than adults had, using the slogan, "Never Again." This is just one example of how deviant and even criminal behavior can, as Durkheim theorized, lead to something positive that acts as a unifying force in society. And I mean, who knows if it's going to have a lasting effect. Hopefully it does. Robert Merton took this line of thought a bit further. He focused on the idea of dysfunctions of deviance and crime, and this is a very interesting perspective. So way back in the 1940s in the United States, rates of crime were rising. And what Merton tried to do was explain why. At that time, I mean there still is, but especially in the 40s and 50s, there was this concept, the idea of the American dream, that was very commonly accepted. This idea that anybody could be anything. And because American society was so amazing, it was so fair and democratic, this American dream was achievable by anybody. So you could have a nice house in the suburbs with, a nice yard and cool clothes for your family and have a car in the driveway and, just kind of everything that you would want. There was generally a strong belief in American society at that time that equality of opportunity was available to everybody. Not only was this a general belief that existed, but the very existence of it acted to encourage people to pursue it. To pursue this ideal that was essentially measured by acquiring wealth and material possessions. So you'd be able to tell who had pursued this ideal American dream and had achieved it by how much money they made, what kind of car they drove, the clothes they wore. This ideal life of a nice house in the suburbs was put forth as somebody everybody had access to. And that's why I particularly liked this picture on the slide. I mean, I know it's an advertisement. Look, that's what I'm going to have, because everybody was told that's what they could have. Now, since this was all based on equality of opportunity and the idea that anybody could be anything, people were expected to pursue this American dream ideal through legitimate means. That means through education and hard work. Nothing deviant, nothing criminal would be necessary. Because if you did pursue this ideal through these legitimate means, then you too would have a good income and wealth and a nice house and a nice life and everything that could buy. But, and this is a big but, this is the basis of Merton's strain theory. At the same time that society as a whole was widely encouraged to believe in the American dream, including the belief that anybody could achieve it, Merton recognized, rightly so, that there was in reality an imbalance between cultural goals and institutionalized means. In other words, the belief that everybody could achieve the American dream was false. Everybody could not achieve it. Everyone did not, in fact, have equal access to it. There was a disconnect. There was this cultural goal of the American dream, but the structure of American society did not support achieving that dream for everybody. Instead, Merton stated that this cultural goal of the American dream was actually inaccessible to everybody. A person's class and their race and their gender would affect their access to it. And you know what? Maybe they wouldn't have any access to it at all, no matter how hard they worked. Merton said this creates strain. Strain between the goals of achieving it and the means, or should I say the lack thereof, to achieve it, which would result in a gap and create strain. So Merton argued that when individuals are faced with a gap between their goals, which is the American dream, and their current status, that strain occurs. He said strain is the result of a culture that teaches people to value material success. But at the same time, the society in which that culture exists doesn't provide enough legitimate opportunity for everybody to achieve that material success. In a way, it's like a no-win situation for some people. The relationship between cultural ideals of success and our society's structural reality is dysfunctional. They don't match, and as a result, this produces strain. Now, when faced with strain, according to Merton, people have 5 ways to adapt. And here they are outlined, and I'm going to go through each one of them. So the first thing that people might do when faced with this strain is to simply conform. They still pursue cultural goals through socially approved means. And if you look at society, either in the 40s or now, this is in fact what most people do when they don't have the material rewards they want. Most people are not living the high life no matter how hard they work. But most of us still abide by societal norms and haven't resorted to crime. The majority of us conform, and this is what Merton called this reaction to strain. He called it conformity. So you think you're still going to be able to get that dream, you just keep going through legitimate means. That's how you react to the strain. Ritualism is different. Ritualism refers to rejecting the goals of society, but you still continue to follow them. So what this means is that a person will still try to get an education, they'll still work hard for what they have, but their dreams are smaller. They're more humble, they're more modest. So they make use of the same socially approved means to achieve these less elusive goals. They'll try not to be as materialistic. They're not going to get caught up with keeping up with the Joneses by getting a new car every few years, or feeling like they need to renovate or wear a certain label of clothing or whatever it is. They are conforming. They're not breaking any social norms. They're not being criminal and certainly not deviant, but their goals have been adjusted. Retreatism is another reaction, and I know that this slide is a little bit overly dramatic. Let's just go out and get trashed. But retreatism refers to rejecting the goal and also rejecting the means. They're not going to be concerned with getting a good education in order to get a good job. They kind of drop out of the race. They refuse to play the game, so to speak. They stay out of it. Another reaction to strain, according to Merton, is innovation, and this could take a couple forms. So if you look at this picture, it says, I'm heading right to the top, and I don't care how many dead bodies I have to climb over to get there. So they're using socially unapproved or unconventional means, meaning they're going to still try to reach that goal, but they're going to go about it in a disreputable manner. Or innovation might mean they start dealing drugs on the side to make some extra money, or stealing to achieve financial security. They might shoplift. They might participate in any range of criminal activity in order to come closer to reaching their desired goal and thus reducing their strain. And then we have rebellion. And as I speak about this, I want you to keep the hippie movement of the 1960s in mind. Somebody who responds to strain with rebellion is a person who rejects the goals, rejects the means, and they try to replace them. Remember that the hippie movement in the 1960s was much more than sex, drugs, and rock and roll. People were opposed to the current state of the country. They were opposed to intervention in Vietnam. They were opposed to government intervention in people's lives. It opposed materialism. So it really did try to reject the cultural goals and means of society at that time. So to summarize Merton's strain theory, it explains deviant behavior as an inevitable outcome of the strange that people experience when society doesn't provide adequate and approved means to achieve culturally valued goals. So you have this society that places cultural value on economic success and wealth, but only provides legally sanctioned means for a small portion of the population to achieve these goals. So those excluded may turn to unconventional or criminal means of attaining them. And we can take this idea of strain for theory a step further and apply it to groups of people instead of just individual people. It provides a good basis for understanding how gangs form and operate. Gangs, at least in part, have rejected traditional, legitimate society, and they'll generally justify why they've done that. To them, their justifications adequately explain their illegal activity, and their perspective makes their illegal activity okay, acceptable, maybe even moral, at least to them. But keep in mind, this is all being explained from a functional point of view. Now, to just summarize functionalism here, what did Emile Durkheim focus on? He focused on how breaking a rule or a norm actually reinforces to the rest of society what that rule or norm is and helps to bring the rest of society together in reaction to it, creating solidarity. Robert Merton focused on the American dream and how a widespread belief that anybody can achieve it, even though that's not true, then creates strain and how people react to that strain.